today's show, I speak with Levi Barker. Levi is from the Iboga Wellness Center in Costa Rica. We speak all about the history and the indigenous roots of Iboga and Ibogaine. And we go into his personal journey as to where he encountered it and how it served him and how it's implemented and used in its modern setting at the Iboga Wellness Center. And we talk all about the different, the actual experience as itself, what users gain from it, how the medicine works, and really the demystifying a lot of the modern concepts around Iboga. So I hope you enjoy. Have a great show.
Melanie Curtis, Jason Maletsky. Big goals, deep work. Love, fear. Being human. Learning to live in alignment with our values. On the path to our full potential. Trust the journey.
Levi, welcome to the show today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jason. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I'm actually really thrilled that you're here today because today we're diving into a topic which we haven't really done much exploration of on this show. And it's one that's been of deep personal interest to me for a very long time, something I've been aware of for 25 years. But it also is a topic that tends to linger on the fringes of the consciousness. I don't feel like it's very central to psychedelics, to healing, to a lot of the medicinal work. It's still kind of this like, somewhere off in the distance. So I'm really excited about getting into the topic of Iboga and Ibogaine and the difference between them and hearing about your work and your journey. So where I'd like to start off with is just for a basic foundation for our audience who may have no idea at all what we're talking about. What is Iboga and what is the difference between Iboga and Ibogaine?
Good. That's a good place to start because people really intertwine the two things. And so, even coming here, trying, make our information pretty specific and I'd love to try Ibogaine. And that is what a lot of people think when they hear of Iboga, Ibogaine, that it is the same thing. And so, very simply, at the top level, Ibogaine is an alkaloid within the root bark of the Iboga plant. And so within the Iboga root bark of the plant, there's 13 known alkaloids. There's probably more. It's never had an extensive discovery done of all the alkaloids in a professional setting, say maybe a pharma company would. So definitely think there's more things in there as well as the rest of the plant. And so Ibogaine was the first alkaloid that was able to be extracted from the Iboga root bark by a guy named Chris Jinks. And so Ibogaine became well known. A guy named Howard Lotsoff, the young opiate addict, and that's immediately kind of what people even within, say, plant medicine communities think when they hear Iboga or Ibogaine. They're like, oh yeah, it's a, drug addiction or detox tool, which it certainly is, but it's much more than that as well. And so, Ibogaine was the first alkaloid to be able to be separated from the rest of the alkaloids, and they found that it had this properties to, at least for opiate detoxification, which can be very painful, alleviate 80 to 75 to 85, 90, 95% of the physical withdrawal symptoms. And so, Iboga is a shrub from West Central Africa or Equatorial Africa, the Congo, Cameroon, and most well known in Gabon, where the Bwiti come from, which is a spiritual path based around Iboga. I would say for the listeners in general, Ibogaine is probably, there's Ibogaine clinics that are set up pretty much specifically for opiate detox work. And then, so it's kind of more of a medical procedure. Whereas when you're working with the Iboga plant, at least here it's done in a ceremonial fashion. And it's a spiritual experience. And so,
Does it sound like the difference between a clinical setting versus a ceremonial traditional setting?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very, very different. The clinics are typically run by doctors for the most part. And here, just people on this side of it, people that have, dedicated many years to learning to work with it in a traditional way while making it comfortable, for Westerners to be able to experience this medicine for the first time and be able to, get a lot out of it. I mean, for me, Iboga at its core is this really a tool to really know ourselves on a deep level, know what life is about and know how to be a human here on Earth.
Yeah. So take me into some of the traditional roots of the use of the plant itself. I've personally heard some speakers referring to the traditional usage in the dream world and using it in like a microdose capacity where they would take a small amount of the leaf of the plant and chew it up and leave it in their mouth, maybe under their tongue, as they go to sleep at night as kind of a divination of the spirit world to help guide their decisions in life. But this is about all I know with regards to the traditional use. So tell me more about its traditions, how it's used in Gabon, in Cameroon, in these areas, and what that would look like.
Yep. So Iboga, the Iboga root bark, where most of the medicine is. You mentioned the leaf. There is actually medicine in the leaves as well, but typically, traditionally, the bark from the root of the plant is used. And so it was first discovered by the first human discovery, anyways, was by pygmy people. So some of the native tribes in that area, and they had observed animals eating at the root of the plant. And at some point, they tried it for themselves, got downloads of information, just connection with nature, guidance, on where to hunt. And so they actually kept it secret for who knows how ever many years. That part's not clear, but eventually they did introduce it to some of the other, at that time anyways, tribal groups in the Gabon, Congo area. And so some of the very first one that I'm aware of would be Iboga used for fertility, which is kind of a, back in the day, even with, say, Native Americans or whatever indigenous people, like that's, a problem if, a man can't produce a baby or a woman can't have a baby. And so that was one of the first traditional uses for it. Also hunting, just the heightening of the senses to be able to go out, in smaller doses. It gives you a lot of energy to trek through the forest. It heightens, auditory senses to be able to hear movement, say, of animals. And yeah, this really gives you a lot of energy to keep going. So, those were kind of the first big two. From there, as it grew more traditional, like non-spiritual purposes would be, and it's still used today in Gabon for type 2 diabetes control, as well as blood pressure control. The root bark of the plant lowers the blood pressure down. And then there's, big ceremonial doses. So at some point, the pygmy people, the Bongo or Babongo people, started having their ceremonies in private. And at some point, they shared it with some of the other people. And, then word spread around about this very special plant and its properties and its ability to offer guidance to, the village, to its people. And like I said, and this kind of the same with all, master plants that come from the earth, just a very deep connection with nature comes from that. And so that's when the Bwiti tradition was born. The Pygmy people had their own rituals, shared it with some other groups, and then some different kind of variations of that grew. And so one of the other first traditional uses was to take Iboga to study all the rest of the plants in the forest to know how to heal other things that maybe Iboga can't heal, malaria or, parasites or whatever it may be. It would guide them to different plants to, experiment with and find the right combination to use. And then, the big one is just a very deep spiritual journey into themselves. And, and that's when, so typically during one of those type of ceremonies, larger doses are eaten depending on the type of Bwiti that it is. And those typically go, anywhere from 48 to 72 hours.
Wow.
You can.
Are these like traditional kind of initiation ceremonies where at some point in the maturation of a young person, they would imbibe in order to come to know themselves?
Yeah, if you grew up in the Bwiti, so, today there's people that join Bwiti, later in life as young adults, teenagers, or even later than that. And then there's, people that grow up in it. And so if you grow up in it, you're always, taking little bits, participating in ceremony. But then, at some point, if you're a girl, 12 to 15, you'll probably have your initiation sometime in there. Boy, 13 to 18, 19, something like that. You'll probably have your initiation ceremony to really, experience what they call Bwiti, which is really just, like the source of everything. Yeah. And
so interesting. It feels like that's something that modern culture misses out on a lot. When we look at tribal roots, tribal systems, we go back through time all across the world, there are these initiatory type ceremonies where somewhere in that kind of young adolescence to later teenage years, the youth are exposed to something that opens up their eyes, opens up their souls, brings them into deep connection with themselves and the universe and their place within it all. And it sounds like this is another one of those types of ritualistic ceremonial uses of plants to help us do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a big problem, for most of us in the West is, all of our traditions have been lost, and now it's, Christmas, nothing against Christmas. I love it. But, Thanksgiving, some of the Latinos, or at least from Mexico, or I guess Latin America in general, you have the quinceañera for the women. For the boys, not much anymore. And so, we kind of lost these traditional values and just guidance on, life. And kids, I certainly would appreciated something like that, some guidance. Okay, here's when I'm coming into a man and I'm getting prepared for doing this. And, here's what's here's what I'm shooting for after. And simply doesn't happen anymore. And so people kind of, find something on their own to replace that with, and many times without a lot of guidance, don't replace it with great things,
Yeah. Let me take us back to the actual compound itself for a second. I'm curious to learn more about the actual molecule. Is it comes from the tabernanthe plant? Is that correct?
Tabernanthe or tabernanthe?
Tabernanthe. And I've read that it's a nootropic, that it has the ability, much like psilocybin, to help us to rewire the neural pathways in our mind. So I'm curious, is it a tryptamine? Does it fall into that category of molecules?
I don't believe it's a tryptamine. I have to ask my buddy who is like a biochemist, but I don't believe so. Iboga and a lot of the interest in the Iboga alkaloids in general is because it just about reacts with every receptor that we have in the body, and so it's really encompassing in that way. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know, if it's a tryptamine or not, but it's definitely in its own class. It's unlike, obviously
Yeah.
our master plants, and they all teach us and guide us, and like that. But this way, they're all different. You've experimented
Yeah.
things. It's a very different thing.
I've had a fair amount of experience myself with, I don't know, quotes, master plants, as we refer to them in the English language. And some of them that have really surprised me, actually, that maybe we've taken them out of context in the Western world, or have very much taken them out of context. Plants like tobacco is one for great example. Cannabis, marijuana, another. And each of these, the tobacco plant versus, say, the psilocybin mushroom or the ayahuasca vine or the Iboga plant, these are, very, very different spirits in their own being, in the way that they engage the human soul and how we interact with them, and the way that they guide or lead, show, open up our experience to. Tell me a little bit more about Iboga and how the plant works with the human who is experiencing it. What does the journey entail, and what could somebody expect if they were going to participate?
The sponsor of today's episode is Great Spirit Farm. Yes. Love having Great Spirit Farm with us, and specifically their ayahuasca microdose tincture. It is a natural MAOI antidepressant and anti-anxiety. Great Spirit Farm describes the feeling as a warm hug. It can help you access deep creativity, flow, intuition, and improve vivid dream recall, which actually has totally been my experience.
So what is exactly in the bottle is the ayahuasca vine itself. So this is a tincture extraction, double extraction tincture that contains the Banisteriopsis caapi vine. Now, the particular vine that this has been extracted from has been growing in Florida now for over 25 years. And the ayahuasca vine does not contain DMT, so that makes this tincture 100% legal in all 50 states.
Yeah, Great Spirit Farm recommends starting with 1 to 3 dropperfuls and increasing your dose gradually from there until you feel the effects. There are no known contradictions with antidepressants, and always check with your doctor and only take as directed.
And what's really great about what Great Spirit Farm is doing is they're making sure that 10% of all the sales are returned to the Shipibo tribe, honoring the medicine's indigenous roots with active reciprocity. Now, if you want to try this tincture out for yourself, you can go to the website that is ayadose.com, AYADOSE.com, and you can enter our discount code TTJ10 to get 10% off your order. Again, that's ayadose.com and all caps TTJ10 to get 10% off your order.
And so I can, speak to here. So, how it's ingested, you pull up the roots of the plant, and there's a tiny little bit of skin on the roots, which you scrape off. And then the second layer of the bark just peels off very easily. And so you peel off that bark, dry it in the sun, and then grind it up into a powder. And so that's typically how it's served. If you get like fresh root bark just off the plant where it's still wet and just kind of chew it in little strips, that's definitely a special time if you get that, and that typically only happens in Gabon. And so here we take the wood of the root bark that's ground up, we mix it with honey, And we mix it with honey for a couple reasons. It's just much easier to get down, just like, any of the medicines, none of them are, very tasty. And so mix it with honey to make it easier to get down. It's
Honey's a natural preservative too. Yeah.
yeah. And there's a special relationship with Iboga and the bees and that connection as well. It sits easier in the stomach, and then the honey also potentiates the Iboga a bit to get it moving within somebody. So at least, here we would serve that off of a spoon, at least for the first couple doses, big tablespoons of it. So somebody would get that down, and then somewhere, depending on the person, 20, 30 minutes to an hour and a half, or say 2 hours in, the first sensations start. Typically, people feel like they warm up a bit. They may start yawning a bit. Eventually, kind of start getting tracers, kind of flashing lights and things happening. And eventually, once it really kicks in, you're going to be like, I need to lay down at some point. And so at some point, people lay down, and what's kind of just go through some, it's very different for everybody, but there is some common things that come up. So once the medicine gets strong enough, usually for people, unless they've been through this a couple times, the mind really starts racing very, very quickly, where your mind is just jumping around quicker than you can even keep up with. And so
time dilation.
What's that?
Is it time dilation?
It's basically like mixing up all the things that have happened in our mind, as well as recalibration of brain chemistry happening during that time. And so it starts kind of scraping those things out of the mind, and we just kind of catch them for a very brief second before it's on to the next one. And
Gotcha.
That can go on for an hour and a half, 2 hours or so. And so when that happens for people, we tell them, we prepare before. When you get that, that's a really great thing. You're getting a mind detox, you're creating space in your mind. You'll be able to focus more afterwards, and, put your attention on what's actually important in life. And so that typically happens for, 90% of people, that the mind starts racing for a period of time. About 60% of people have some sort of visions happen. It depends if people are, more experienced, say with Iboga or other plants, and have kind of like broke down some of the walls. They seem to come up more. For some people, it's very realistic, just like they're their visions happening. Others are maybe, geometric shapes and things happening like that. And so, but what we remind people, like, really the deep healing with Iboga just doesn't happen through the visions. And, seen it, through the last 11 years or so, that the healing with Iboga a lot of it doesn't happen through visions. So don't worry about getting the visions. And definitely through the body, maybe besides combo, Iboga is like the most physically detoxing of, say, the master plants that I'm aware of. And so that can definitely bring up nausea, which is definitely related to, guilt or, forgiveness that needs to come up, or, perception of self.
Emotional blockages. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. There you go.
Yeah.
And so, so people, feel that physically start moving up in them, and, decent amount of people will purge at some point during the night, but not, typically not for hours on end, 1, 2, 3 times during the night, it'll happen. For other people, it can, if they have a lot of it in there, or say, they've been drinking a lot beforehand, or just kind of abusing their body in some way, that can come up more. And so, this part of it, goes on for about 6, 8 hours, 10 hours, where it's kind of the heaviest part. Here in the morning time after ceremony, we get people up and take them back to their room for some quiet time. And usually people are very, very ready to get back to their room. It's just it stimulates every sense that you have in your body, your physical senses, your intuition, everything is just jacked up, all the way. And so, what's happening during the night from my observation or during this intense part is the medicine is just going in, scraping, breaking things down, like you're saying, loosening things up and bringing them to the surface. And then as it slows down and we get into later in the morning, early afternoon, the next day, a release happens. And the release comes from a very, very deep place, but people aren't out of control either. There's not people flailing around or screaming or anything like that. Like, it's a very low key event, kind of tough to explain, but these emotions, fears, whatever it may be, start coming up and out. And when that happens, and we definitely try and guide people when that happens, we remind people, like, this doesn't mean Iboga is not working, because people can come in and just have very dark thoughts that they need to get out. And so they start going through that and they're like, well, I came here to not be depressed and now I'm triple depressed, And so
Yeah.
this is part of the process for people. And so this releasing process happens, and it can happen for hours, and so we're checking on people, just supporting them, through that time. And so it's definitely not a fun one, it's a deep cleaning physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and to bring about so much change in such a short amount of time, it's just a little bit painful and it's uncomfortable, and you gotta, be there to go through it. And so eventually these things that we need to get out, move on their way. Typically, people are up for 24 hours, 30 hours. Sometimes, somebody may be up for 48 hours through the medicine, but it's not like they're in this deep journey the whole time. It's just the medicine's continuing to work through them. And the general rule is you don't sleep until it's done.
I found that with many psychoactives that, even when the bulk or the central part of the journey is long over, the body's not ready to, or doesn't have the capacity to shift into a sleep state. There's some deep rest where we need to just lay still or sit still and allow the body to continue its process, where, whatever compound it might be. I think almost all of them have left me at times with a sensation of sleeplessness, but also knowing that there's still a lot going on inside, even though the hyperactivity of the mind has now settled and the waves are calm. It's still like draining the tub kind of thing, just like letting it all slowly wash out.
Absolutely.
Talk to me a little bit about the risks. I want to understand the differences between Iboga and Ibogaine and what kind of risks actually exist. What should people be aware of?
Yeah, you do need to be in decent physical shape to go through this. And it can be very physically taxing, and I can go kind of into some of the physical benefits later. But the main thing is, you need to make sure you don't have any arrhythmias that, have been recorded before, heart attacks, things like that. The medicine, Iboga, typically lowers the blood pressure quite a bit. And so, if it's like athletic, low blood pressure because you're in really good shape, that's typically okay. But, say a weak heart. So yeah, people, with us anyways, definitely have to go through a questionnaire, get some of their history of their physical health. Everybody has to get an electrocardiogram at some point, and typically how we do that is if they've ever been told they've had a heart problem or there's ever been a concern about their heart, we get that before. If they've never, been aware of any heart issues, they're welcome to get it with a doctor here in country. So, if you go looking into Iboga or Ibogaine, go Google it. Eventually, some of the first things that are going to come up are like PubMed and research journals and, death, cardiac arrest, with Ibogaine.
Yeah.
And that does happen. And, but the thing to keep in mind is with 99% of those deaths that have happened, they've happened during some sort of drug detox scenario. Most of them opiate detox. A lot of them happen for people doing it at home. And so, and that's with Ibogaine as well. So taking, say, Ibogaine for an opiate detox is a totally different thing than using it for psychospiritual purposes, and you're not going through some sort of detox process. And so, people have to be, in decent physical shape. Definitely, use intuition on them as well if they're ready for something like this. But we get plenty of people in their 60s, some in their 70s. We've even had a few in their 80s come down and go through this experience. And you definitely have to be a bit more careful with them and observe them more. One of the main things that has happened with a lot of the complications that have come up is people get dehydrated. Maybe they're purging a lot during say the ceremony or their detox or whatever is going on. So it's very important. Like, we really are strict on people the day of ceremony to drink plenty of water. We give them coconut water, electrolytes if they need. At some point, they stop drinking, and then a couple hours before, supplement them with magnesium. And there was actually, the first time it's been included in a study. Anyways, I've known about it for quite a while, but a Stanford study where they showed, magnesium infusions prior to taking Ibogaine in this case really mitigated a lot of the heart complications that can come.
Yeah,
with
that's what
it.
I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. And so you say once people hit that point in their journey where they feel like they need to lay down and they've now moved to a restful position, is it tend to be an inward experience, like eyes closed, meditative, or does there tend to be a lot more vocalization, talking, interacting, eyes open? Like, give me a little bit more insight into that, the duration of it, or how the structure is held. Like, what is the how is the space maintained by whoever's guiding it, and who's guiding it?
Typically, here for most of them, I'm guiding it along with team members. Sometimes some of my staff. So one of my team members recently graduated after about 4.5 years. And when I say graduated, that means being given the blessing from, Indigenous Bwiti Ganga, what we call
Bwiti,
shaman, to be able to serve the medicine. Doesn't make you a Bwiti shaman per se. That's a different thing that typically takes a lifetime. But to be able to serve the medicine to Westerners in a way where it can consistently give them good results, and do it in a safe way, and just pay your dues, basically. I mean, my own kind of training per se was about over 7 years time before I actually served anybody medicine from that. But yeah, so one of the more important parts of being here, and what for Westerners, one of the most important parts of the Bwiti, and at least with the Bwiti I've studied with my first teachers, it's a really beautiful oral tradition about being human and life, and what do we do with all these things we have to go through as humans. Our thoughts, how do we manage our mind, how do we perceive the past, and what do we do with it, our feelings. And so we share this tradition with them, like kind of starting at the beginning, coming out the womb, from day one, when we come through our mother and come into earth, everything that we'll ever need is here for us and provided by nature. Like all our food, our water, medicine, everything is already here for us. So we separate the laws of men versus the laws of nature. And obviously we have to work within the laws of humans that is set up in civilization now, but the laws of nature definitely trump those. And, what really happens through people's life, through their mind, through experiences, whatever has happened is, people start losing the appreciation for life. They stop, really valuing their life, the awe and wonder of being a human and really respecting the gift that we've been given to be here on earth and live. We lose that. And so that's really the first thing that Iboga puts back into people is this just deep appreciation of being here and being alive. And, we talk about there is nothing bigger than living. Like, can we even imagine anything bigger than living? We can't.
That's the greatest gift of all.
Yeah. Without our life, like what's going on? Not really sure.
Yes. Yeah. So I let's go down this road. You started to talk about it. I would like to hear about your own personal journey, if you would be open to sharing. How did you first come into contact with these substances, with the traditions? What was your personal journey like? What's led you to where you are today in the practice of Iboga?
Yeah. When I was listening to one of your interviews yesterday, definitely had a lot in common. So, grew up, born to 18, 19-year-old parents, divorced when I was 2. On my mother's side of the family, a lot of drugs and alcohol. My grandfather and his brothers, my great uncles, were all, heroin addicts from a very young age, like in the 50s, from the time they were like 14 years old. And, so, having a junkie lead the household, it doesn't, create the most, safe or productive environment. And so, went through that. My dad had it together, so that was good to like kind of had some balance there. But I lived with my mom previously. But anyways, one of the first things that I remember that sent me in the wrong direction is being a kid around 8 years old, 9 years old. And during that time, say the mid 80s, 85 or so, the news started coming out about, addiction being a genetic thing, and that,
I remember
during that kind of crack boom or something like that. And that, these babies that are born, if you're born to an addict parent, they really don't have a choice, and they're basically doomed to addiction. And that's what it is because it's in their genes. And I heard that. I was like, oh shit, that.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, me too.
It's already said.
Yeah.
And so, I definitely took that in. And so, I remember that even from a young age, knowing, what a horrible environment was created from drugs or, opiates in this case, and other drugs. I remember thinking, well, that means at some point, I'm going to try heroin or opiates. And, so went through life kind of similar to you, first weed at, 10 or so, and had my first acid at 12, and, methamphetamine, I think at 12, things like that. And at some point, I kind of grinded through and did decently well. And then, always like party and had a good time. And, I was pretty reserved. And so whenever I got some in me, let me out, and I was able to, communicate with people, and the little confidence came up a bit. But eventually, I was a snowboarder, and I broke my wrist snowboarding. And so I got the first prescription for Percocet, and, that was, I was like, oh, here it is. This is wonderful. And then, obviously for all the stopped working, and then, okay, well, what's stronger, because this isn't doing it anymore. And eventually, you get to heroin or, methadone pills at the time, things like that. And then, I remember getting sick for the first time and thinking I had the flu. And then, my friend told me, no, that's not the flu, man. Like, you're going through withdrawal. And I'm like, okay, I can manage this. And, kind of did for a while. Like, I wasn't like a shoplifting when I worked, and just tried to do the best I can. But eventually, got out of hand. I went to a couple rehabs in the younger years. Eventually, I got clean for a period of time, like did really good, and putting myself into work and business. Then went back into it and kind of got to the point where I was just kind of maintaining, but could just never get fully away from the opiates, whether Vicodin, Percocets, whatever it may be. And one of my good friends who's really into plants, I just asked him, like, hey man, like there has to be something that can help with this. And this was probably 21 years ago. He's like, Iboga. He's like, and he has like probably everything that you could ever imagine, like at some, office or warehouse. He has a little bit of everything. He's like, I have some and I'll send it to you. And at that time I met my now wife in Nicaragua. So I was kind of going back and forth at that time. I moved out of San Diego, came to Nicaragua, and was kind of settling in Nicaragua more. And so he sent me some. I brought it to Nicaragua, and this was kind of pre scanner days when they just had the metal detectors, and I had it. I put it in my underwear like a dummy and just not in the bag. And I remember walking through there and behind me, and got it back. And then came the time to take it. And so I actually, which is a really bad idea for anybody listening, but I did a home detox. And so, and it was root bark as well. And so, say for detox, like ibogaine is the preferred avenue for that over Iboga. And so, took it, and for a detox experience, at least with Iboga, like it's psychedelic, but it's definitely focused more on cleaning you, healing you physically, getting the junk out of your system, alleviating the shaking and the restless legs. And so I got through that. After about 4 days later, I was up for about 3 nights, slept on the fourth night, and I woke up and I was still in rough shape because things weren't good. I was clean now, but I was still me, and same mind, same habits, everything going on. And I was like, wow, that's amazing, and I kind of knew from that point, like I would love to be able to help people with this. And so at that point, I didn't know anything about Bwiti or traditional use of it. And I kind of grinded it through for about a year and a half. And a year and a half later, my good friend, went to Costa Rica and went to this Iboga retreat started by my first teacher named Magenda. And he started a place called Iboga House, and it was kind of the first, it was the first Bwiti-based traditional Iboga retreat outside of Africa. He's really responsible for bringing Iboga to the West in a traditional way. Prior to that, there was some people working with ibogaine. And so through that friend, I met him, started having some ceremonies with him, and eventually heard that he was training some people to work with Iboga. And I asked him if I could do that. And looking back, I definitely wasn't ready. But thankfully, he's like, okay. Yeah. So he kind of eased me in through time. Definitely.
I don't think we're ever ready, a lot of the time when we are in these initiatory stages, we know it's the right move. We're far from ready, but it's the right time, So interesting.
Yeah, for sure. You have
so tell me more. Carry on.
Yeah. I agree. You got to just take the step, and I remember him too.
Yeah.
Like, we were friends before, me and Magenda, and everything was cool. And I remember when he told me, okay, yeah, you can train, come back next month or whatever it is, and we'll start. And I got back there, and you start with the basics, like here's where you put the buckets, here's where this is at, and here's how you clean up. But the dynamic changed. It wasn't like he was my friend anymore. He was like, I'm the one teaching you now. And so I didn't expect that. He wasn't like, this is how it's going to be. So I was like, what? You mad at me or do something wrong? And so, he was a lot firmer at that time, which was good. And So yeah, I did that over many years. He had this place. I just saw a lot of different looks. He would do, detox back in the day, psycho-spiritual, just a lot of ceremonies. I remember sometimes we would have 4 ceremonies in a week. So we'd do a ceremony, sleep a bit during the day, stay up all night again, go through it again. But eventually, after doing that a long time, I met Gary Cook, who is the original founder of Iboga Wellness. He's a mentor of mine, great friend and guide. He was Maginda's first student to start his own retreat. So Gary graduated, dedicated his life to Iboga at maybe 55 or so. Sorry, Gary, if I get that, but maybe, he was maybe 55, and he had a technology company, and basically he's like, I want to do Iboga, and somebody offered to buy his company, and he did, and he dove all the way in, and he started Iboga Wellness, and so Gary started Iboga Wellness. At that, right around that time, Maginda went back to Gabon, Africa, and so Iboga Wellness was the only spot for traditional based Iboga. And Gary, thankfully, really subsidized Iboga Wellness to keep it going through the early years, through the first 3 years or so, like just throwing money out the window to keep this place open when one person comes through. 2, it definitely wasn't supporting the cost of keeping it open, but he kept going ahead. Eventually 3 years in or so, it started like covering the expenses of things, but he really dedicated himself to it. So I continued my training initially with Gary for about a year. And then at the end of that year, I went to Gabon for the first time to be initiated. So I'd been around Iboga, at least 7 years by that time before actually going to get initiated into the Bwiti. So I went and saw Maginda, had my first initiation, which was really beautiful. And at the end of that trip, got the blessing from Maginda to, you can serve the medicine now. Graduated, and kind of the same thing. So then you get back to Iboga Wellness, and it was kind of like starting from the beginning again. They got the spoon, shaking. Here you go. Am I doing it right?
That sounds like a beautiful journey.
Yep. And so, Iboga, really, really saved me in many ways. Showed me, who I was. How to think, how to be here. And so, it was a pretty rough life, but if it wasn't like that, I definitely wouldn't be here. So I'm just super blessed.
Well, I'm really, really happy for you. And it's wonderful to hear your story and how you found yourself through the process. Thank you for sharing that with us. And it's the personal journey is always one that I can speak from my own experience. It's whenever we delve back into our own journey and are vulnerably open and share that with the world, it's inspiring to those who are listening. It's also can be painful, can be challenging, can be difficult for ourselves to relive those experiences as we verbalize and vocalize and share them with the audience. So thank you very much for your willingness to be authentic and vulnerable there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah. Let me ask for a little pivot right here. I've been very blessed in my life to have had the opportunity to work with some very incredible individuals within the special forces communities throughout NATO. And it's not something I ever imagined myself doing. I just happened to happen upon this journey, and suddenly I've got this friends, business associates, people I've worked with who've spent their lives working in special forces as soldiers, as the top tier soldiers in the world. And I've seen a trend occurring amongst some of those friends and within the community at large for treating PTSD and TBIs and the associated depression that comes with them through the use of Iboga, and seen some pretty magical, life-changing results. So let's take a minute and speak towards those ideas and hear your perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to find some team members to kind of have a veteran program. I do think it probably needs to be led by somebody who's been there, for those men and women to really feel comfortable with it all. But absolutely, PTSD in general, it sounded like you'd seen it, but you saw like the data and the research on that Iboga study, where it's the only thing to start reversing TBI injuries. And
Exactly. Yeah.
so very, I knew that through experience and observing people prior to that, but it was beautiful to see it validated. We've had a good share of military come through the years, and it works for me. As long as that, with Iboga, the most important part is there has to be that tiny little bit in there that I want to get better. May not know how to do it, where to go, what to do, but if given the opportunity to move forward, I'm going to take it. So as long as they have that little bit, which a majority of them do, they're not, happy with where they're at, and waking up to nightmares or, whatever is going on with them. And the properties of Iboga, because it's one thing, to study things in the mind. And I know I shouldn't look into the past, and I know I shouldn't let it affect me anymore because it's not happening anymore. But what happens through those experiences as people go through them is they develop a energetic charge in their body as they go through it, which, unless you're really good at some other modality, it's very difficult to get out. And so Iboga, one of its strongest aspects is to be able to get that energetic charge, spirit, whatever it may be, and get it moving on, And so when you can get that out, then the healing can start to happen. And so, it definitely works. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I found myself very curious about the experience, having suffered a number of TBIs myself throughout my career in athletics. The number of times that I've smashed or cracked a helmet is something that I didn't really understand the quote impact of until getting into later life and really looking back on how that's affected me. And I know, so I have so many beautiful friends who are veterans who've been involved in a lot of concussion injuries, just due to the amount of explosions that they've been subject to, along with the emotional scarring that comes with the trauma of being witness to the atrocities that occur in wartime. So I feel like any of these avenues that exist for us to find a path into ourselves, like to find that, I think I heard you referring to it, it's that like willingness to, the willingness to me is an opening or an acceptance and allowing versus like a closing or a resistance, a denying. Anywhere we're able to find an opening in the fence or in the brick wall that we've built around the self that we're trying to guard and protect, if there's somewhere where we can create an opening and we can start to allow that the love and the healing, the medicine, and that positive energy to flow in and to help do its work, it can allow that opening to become bigger and bigger and to start to become an energetic flow both in and out. So I feel like this has been, again, I'm speaking from my own personal journey. I would never speak from anybody else's, but the psychedelic journey of learning to drop the resistance in order to allow these master plants, these medicines, these positive energies in, is a huge part of the whole process in itself. Yeah. So my question is, with your own personal experience, both administering and experiencing the effects of Iboga, how does this relate to you? How can you tell the audience a little bit more about how that plant works with us in order to help us on our journey to allowing, to receiving?
Yep, that little bit has to be in there. Yeah, that spark, like you're saying, to get better. So, an example would be we try and weed them out pretty good now, but we've had a couple of people come down where they're trying to save their marriage or their parents are, and getting them down there, and they're like, okay, I'll do it. But as long as people have that little bit in there, then yeah, it can definitely work. And so, yeah, the beautiful thing about Iboga, and as long as that's in there, even if through the experience they're resisting it, doing it wrong, this isn't going to work. Like, you can go back and forth with Iboga like that for hours and hours. Eventually, it's going to win. It's going to wear you out. You're going to be like, okay, I'm here. I'm going to be in this one for a while.
Okay, I see.
And then, starts processing. And then, at some point during this process, as it goes on long enough, eventually the mind completely shuts down. Then you think about everything you've ever thought about, all your fears, all the, negative ways that you treat yourself, how your mind works, and eventually so much, the mind just shuts down and you're just there. And you're just there, and, people pop up and kind of think, wow, I haven't had a thought in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it may be. And so, yeah, that's a nice one about Iboga. People can fight it. Eventually, you get them the right dose. Eventually, they just have to be there, and they realize that they're going to have to be there for however long it takes. And the thing with Iboga, though, kind of like I mentioned earlier, in the middle of it, until the medicine is like fully done working on you, it's very common to think that it's not working. So
that's very typical with a lot of psychedelics. Yeah.
Yeah. So people have to give it the time to fully process through. And then eventually, at some point, once they physically recover, they get enough sleep to wake up, and they realize how quiet their mind is. They realize as negative thoughts come in, that they don't have to fully take them in and start interacting with them. They realize that, hey, maybe, I can't let that go. Like, it's not helping me. And they start wanting to take care of themselves. In a lot of ways, Iboga is a tool to protect oneself from oneself, like to not hurt yourself, however we do that. And so it really gives you a nice cushion in there to decide, with each thought, what you're going to do when you're presented with a decision. It slows things down. You'll be like, okay, well, if I go here, here's what's going to happen. Here's how it's going to make me feel. Or maybe I can go this way. Yeah, this would be the way that's best for me. And, I'm on this path now to learning to be good to myself, which eventually leads to liking myself, being proud of myself, and eventually, self-love. And like you were saying that in your interview too, it's not like you just pop up one day like, oh, I love myself. This is, this is,
it's a process.
Yeah. And so, no, it's definitely a process. And one of the beautiful things about Iboga is this, not this journey aspects of it, but this period of guidance goes on for a long time. And so in the case of veterans, also the repairing of the brain, the physical chemistry or the physical tissue healing of the brain that needs to happen continues on for weeks, possibly even months after the experience. And so what people find is they have this period of guidance to really implement new habits and new ways of being. And during that time, people are motivated to do that. They have the concentration and the focus to do what's right for themselves. And so really valuable in that way for people to really make deep shifts in their life. But, at the same time, we're always going to have to, this learning experience and about ourselves just never ends. There's no end point, which is the beautiful part of it. Iboga is a very simple wisdom, and it's not Iboga teaching us Iboga is getting everything out of the way, the filters that we have, where we teach ourselves. And that's really the beautiful part about it. But the longevity of this learning with Iboga is really, really valuable.
Awesome. Levi, thank you very much for that. It's been really wonderful speaking with you today. I've learned a lot, and I hope our audience feels the same way. I'd like to offer, is there anything else that you would like to speak towards or share, or that we haven't touched on yet with regards to the overall topic at all, before we share where our audience can find out more about you and the Retreat Center?
Yeah, one thing, like to address when you kind of got into it in the beginning is even among, say, plant medicine groups or circles, at some point something got out there that, Iboga is just totally crazy and you don't do it unless you're, at rock bottom and it's very, very dangerous. And it's just not that, in reality, Iboga's the most grounded, master plant that I'm aware of. It really deals with what's happening here and now, within us. And so the ceremonies here are very low key for the most part. People aren't flailing or crying or, jumping around or anything. Thankfully, they kind of get off balance and, so nobody's jumping around too much. But it's a very grounding medicine. It's definitely earth-based medicine. It's a root itself where the medicine is. And then just briefly, I think the next frontier for Iboga, we're already starting to see look of it is for neurological conditions. So it's people, things like Parkinson's, MS, neuropathy, things like that. I think there's definitely something that actually works for them, whether, that's the full Iboga root or Iboga or another alkaloid within it. I think that's certainly coming. But that probably 20% of the people that come here have never had a psychedelic experience in their life. They've never had mushrooms or LSD or anything like that. They come in for the first time, and that's perfectly fine. And it's also, we talk a lot about peak performance. I mean, in the end, Iboga is about making the most of our time here that we have on Earth and enjoying it. And, really appreciating our time here. Eventually, we're going to leave our physical body and something's going to happen. But for sure, we're here right now doing this and living. And this is a very beautiful tool for us living.
Thank you for clarifying that, because even myself, as a lifetime highly experienced psychonaut, I also held a preconception that Iboga is kind of like a last resort type experience, and it's great to hear that corrected. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me on. Definitely appreciate being able to share with your audience, and beautiful words, and yes, very inspirational what you guys are doing, and I'm sure you're touching lives. And so, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Where can our audience find out more about you and about the Iboga Wellness Center?
Yeah, the best way is ibogawellness.com, to our website, and pretty much everything flows through there. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you very much, Levi. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today, and I'll look forward to getting to know you more in the future.
Yeah, thanks so much.